Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I didn't notice the moment the desert went quiet. It was a sly kind of silence, like someone had turned the volume down on the world a single notch and waited for us to doubt our ears. A fluorescent ballast hummed over the help desk counter. The server room exhaled through a louvered vent. The coffee on the hot plate ticked as it boiled itself toward bitterness. Everything normal at 2:11, mountain time, at the signal shop in Dugway Proving Ground. The duty phone buzzed once on the desk and stopped before my hand got there. "Rios," I said, expecting another password reset. The voice that answered wasn't a contractor or a junior soldier. It was the operations duty officer from Range Control, balanced and clipped in a way that put my spine upright. "Staff Sergeant, Range West test site missed 2 scheduled checks. Tower at Michael Army Airfield is not answering landline or UHF. The Westgate intercom is dead. We need your section on immediate comms recon." I looked at the clock, the calendar, the laminated emergency cards. Routine checks didn't fail in 3s. "Copy," I said. "On our way. My name is Staff Sergeant Alex Rios, 25U, Signal Support Systems Specialist. Our unofficial job description is make the radios work and the network stop complaining." I'd come to Dugway on a short assignment to help roll out a hardened mesh across the West Desert Test Center, patching between microwave dishes, a couple of grand old copper trunks from the Cold War, and the new satellite terminal that could talk to Salt Lake when storms wiped the others. It's a beautiful, strange place. 1,200 square miles of salt flats, volcanic hills, and the buried bones of old test ranges. Most nights are wind and stars, and the distant blinking red of tower beacons. That night, a quiet had replaced the wind. We mobilized 3 vehicles from the security forces motor pool, 2 and 1,278 JLTVs with protective kits, and a tan HMMWV with a RAF spare antennas, a roll of Cat 6, and a Harris /PRC 117 G lashed down in the rear. The JLTVs were call sign Coyote 1 and 2. Our radio truck was Coyote 3. I rode shotgun in the HMWV because I wanted eyes on the radios, hands on the field device, and close enough to the AN/PRC 152A handset to talk without shouting. I'd loaded new hop sets into our SyncGuards nets the day before. The AN/PYQ-10 key loader still felt warm in my pocket. These details comforted me. If the keys were good and the time was good, the world often behaved. We rolled through English Village, where most of the families live, and swung past the airfield. The tower lights pulsed steady. The beacon at Michael Army Airfield turned its polite white streak across the night. The traffic light at the corner stayed red on an empty road until Coyote 1 tapped the siren. Every motion sensor light we passed came alive a fraction late, as if a slow dream was lifting from its eyes. I chalked that up to dust and old wiring and said nothing. Range Control kept the net clean. We tried the tower first, then Westgate, then the West Desert Test Facility switchboard. Nothing answered. Our UHF line to the tower carried back a static bed like wind through cotton. The landline to Westgate gave us a tuneless, low hum. Coyote 2's gunner, Pastor Lawson, leaned down into the cabin and handed me a note through the window at a stop. Got a second line on the tower, backup circuit, also dead. We took UT 196 south toward the West Test area. Skull Valley opened around us, flat and brittle under a pale slice of moon. The salt dust shivered over the road. My driver, Specialist Gomez, kept the HMWV steady and gentle, like he'd been told the asphalt was old and sick. "Test schedule shows a convoy back from the West Chimney. They were on time earlier," I said to the net. "Coyote 3 checking Blue Force tracker." Our JBCP screen showed their last ping just at the WTA admin lot an hour ago. No movement since. The icon hovered there, a little blue chevron surrounded by empty. That should have made my shoulders relax. Parked trucks aren't unusual at 2 in the morning. Instead, the quiet put weight behind my eyes. MCON Alpha, the ops duty officer said on the net. Radio discipline. Report eyes on only. We slid past Westgate. The barrier arm was up. The little guard booth lamp was on, casting a soft cone of light onto a half-open binder and a paper coffee cup. Nobody in the booth. No vehicle lights inbound. No footprints I could see from the cab. Coyote 1 slowed but didn't stop. We were going for the admin building and the power shack first, then the tower. On the ramp toward the West-Test area, they appeared. A dozen figures in coveralls and hard hats, spaced in a straight line along the fence line, all facing the same way. I thought they were waiting for us and trained my flashlight across them. No one waved, no one flinched, no one turned their heads. Their shoulders were even, their hands down. There was something wrong in the way they held themselves, too still, like photographs stuck to a wall. Range personnel spotted at WTA perimeter, Coyote 1 called, non-responsive to hand signals. Coyote 2 confirms, Lawson said from the gun ring. They're just standing there. We stopped 100 meters shy, lights low. I stepped out. The desert air had cooled quickly, and that hum was back. Not the hum of the truck, not my own blood in my ears, but again that low, tuneless droning that lives at the edge of sensing. The JLTVs idled behind me like sleeping beasts holding their breath. I cupped my hands around my mouth. Test crew, I called, calm and professional. You good? Range control sent us. Nothing. The nearest figure was a woman I recognized from the microwave relay team. Ashley, the one who could tune a dish in 20 seconds by feel. Her eyes were open. They looked past me. Her chest rose and fell with the patient regularity of someone resting. Her jaw had that half-open slack that says a thought got interrupted mid-sentence and never came back. Staff Sergeant, Gomez whispered from my shoulder. I don't like this. Me neither, I said. Masks. We pulled our M50 protective masks from the carriers and snapped them on. It wasn't that I thought there was something in the air. It was that a mask granted rule and order to a scene like this. It turned your breath into work and work into calm. I moved closer, with Lawson covering me from the turret and Chief Kincaid, the Senior Security Forces NCO, walking a slow arc to my left, M4 at the low ready, light off. Ashley? I kept my voice soft as I slid into her line of sight without closing distance. If you can hear me, blink twice. Nothing. Hand signals, Kincaid whispered. I gave a few, the simplest, the ones you can do in thick gloves. Are you okay? Do you need help? Follow us. Ashley's eyes did not track. I raised my light, sweeping just to pick up badges. All of them, 12 across the fence, had chosen to stand where the fence vibrated a little in the night breeze. Something about the hum in the wire seemed to catch them. Each face had that same soft slack, that same patient breath. One man had tears dried on his cheeks. Another had a smudge of concrete dust on his forehead, like someone's thumb had blessed him. Ops, Coyote 1, Kincaid said on the net. We have multiple personnel standing, breathing, non-responsive, no obvious injuries. They appear entrained? Entrained? The duty officer asked. Like they're locked onto something, standing at intervals where the chain link hums. This isn't a joke. Ops breathed, and I could hear the staff behind him go silent. Acknowledge, maintain standoff, check the admin building. We left 2 soldiers on watch and went in. The admin door was unlocked. Inside, the fluorescents hummed. Coffee steamed on a burner. Jackets hung on chairbacks. A half-eaten apple sat on a napkin. The napkin had dried into the shape of the apple. Radios on the desk were powered but unkeyed. A calendar on the wall still showed yesterday's date because nobody had flipped the page at midnight. And throughout the building, in doorways, and at the ends of hallways, and in the little alcove by the vending machine, people stood at gentle attention, facing whatever thing in the room made the most consistent sound. The vending machine compressor, the air handler, the coil in the refrigerator. Not all of them were inside. Some were out in the grass, aligned with the path of the buried power ducting like they could sense it. We kept our hands away from them, not as if they were contagious, but as if they were fragile. We gathered badges and names and logged the locations. We called out, and sometimes a blink happened, slow and unassigned to anything we said. There was a pattern in it we did not understand. "Kincaid," I said, "let me check the microwave rack." He nodded, posted one of his soldiers in the corridor, and I slipped into the radio closet. The rack smelled like warm dust and faint plastic. The indicators were green. The dish had power. The signal strength bar sat lower than I liked, but not dead. I swung the test set out and patch cabled in. The spectrum looked normal. No ugly spikes, no noise floor creeping high. But that hum was there again, not in the gear, in my jaw. I remembered a short lecture at Fort Gordon about infrasound and harmonics, how old buildings could sing to you if wind found a note in them. In a place as big as Dugway, there were a lot of notes to be found. Maybe weather had opened an organ pipe in a fence line. Maybe some piece of equipment out on the range had seized and decided to make itself into a tuning fork. Maybe. "Let's check the tower," Kincaid said, tone steady. "Rios, you and me." We eased our convoy onto the airfield road. The beacon kept its climb and fall as if nothing had changed in the world. The tower windows were lit. The door at the base was propped open with a wooden wedge like always. We took the stairs slow, calling out each landing. The wind whistled through the vents. On the cab level, the door had been wedged too. I pushed it back with 2 fingers and stepped onto the rubber mat floor. 2 controllers stood in their chairs, hands at their sides, facing the equipment rack where the radio cabinets hummed. A coffee mug rested near the edge of the desk, not spilled. The radar screen glowed. The mic sat in its clip. The strip board held a single strip for a maintenance flight that had cancelled 2 hours earlier. The room smelled like toner and carpet. No smoke, no ozone, no fear. Their breathing was slow, like sleep standing up. "Ops, Coyote 1, Kincaid said, voice wrapped in cloth. "Tower is manned, but personnel are unresponsive. Everything appears normal otherwise." "Understood," Ops replied. "Medical is being recalled. Sit tight." Kincaid looked at me. "You seeing anything else?" "One thing," I said, and gently turned the volume knob on the UHF set with a gloved fingertip. The room felt different when the sound fell away. The air kind of relaxing. The way a room feels when a refrigerator cuts off and you realize you've been hearing it all along. Both controllers swayed, imperceptibly. Then, together, they leaned almost a degree in the direction of the next loudest thing. The HVAC grill over the doorway, like grass in a light wind. "Okay," Kincaid murmured. "That's new." We cut power to the rack in sequence and watched for any change that looked like pain, like distress. None came. The controllers simply re-aimed their quiet attention to the next hum in line. When we killed that, the neon ballast in the ceiling won the contest, and their chins rose a few millimeters. We didn't go further. We documented. We backed out and left the lights the way we found them. By 4 o'clock, Ops had declared a base emergency under Health Protection Condition Delta. That meant no movement without authorization, no unnecessary alarms, and a standing request to avoid loud signals that could draw a crowd of non-responsive personnel into an unsafe place. The word infected showed up in nobody's voice, not because it wasn't on everyone's mind, but because the room would change its temperature if someone said it out loud. We called them entrained, a term we stole from physics because it made us feel like engineers instead of witnesses. We built a plan on the hood of Coyote 1. My job was to restore an external comms path without sending a dozen people sleepwalking into the teeth of a generator. That meant nudging power, not punching it. Our best shot was the high relay dish on Granite Peak. Line of sight to a dish near the operations building, and from there to a microwave link pointed northeast toward the Wasatch. That line wasn't perfect, but we built it for bad weather. If it could work in a hard winter storm, it could work tonight. Granite Peak was 3 miles away, across low desert and basalt knobs. The access road wound along a fence. And tonight that fence was adorned with people at 100-foot intervals, hands at their sides. Some had headlamps that had run down to faint glows. Some held clipboards like they'd forgotten mid-step what a pencil was for. We drove under 10 miles an hour and never sounded the horn. The hum lived in the fence and the grain of the road, soft and everywhere. At the base of the tower, the chain on the gate was still locked. Good sign. The night smelled like sage and plastic. I climbed with my harness on. Kincaid behind me, 2 more below. My hands felt tender on the steel, like too much noise would wake the structure. At the first platform, I knelt by the junction box and opened it with a quarter turn. The dish lights were green. The power supply buzzed. A gentle insect. I patched in the test set again and watched the spectrum. Normal. Our link toward ops was attenuated. Pointing looked a hair off. There'd been a stiff crosswind earlier. That could do it. Adjust? Kincaid asked, softly. 1/2 degree, I said, and took the spanner to the azimuth bolt, breathing even, turning as if I were trying not to wake someone I loved. The bar rose a notch. The audio path cleared. In my headset, a voice came in like a friend from the next room. West Relay, Ops, the duty officer said. We see you. Good signal. I breathed out, and the tower breathed with me. Ops, Coyote 3, we have a path. Keep it quiet on the range. Understood. Medical advance team is staging at the clinic. They'll move on your call. Any change in subject's condition? I looked down. From the platform, the fence line was a string of tiny human silhouettes under the moon, each aligned to a different edge of hum. I hated calling them subjects. I loved that we had a word. No change, I said. We'll try controlled power down at WTA to reduce ambient hum. We'll monitor response. We made a small, careful plan. We would shut down the vending machine compressors, the air handlers, the non-essential fans. We would stage with litter teams 2 rooms away. We would keep voice volume low. We would place a single, clean sound where we wanted people to move, and we would escort them in quiet pairs if they came. We turned the first breaker off in the admin building with a speed that felt like reverence. The vending machine exhaled for the last time and grew still. The person in the corridor, a young man in a reflective vest, leaned gently away from the dead machine toward a water fountain's compressor at the far end. We killed that, and he angled toward the hum of the server closet. We killed that too. When the world ran out of small sounds, he settled into the tone of the utility closet's fluorescent light, and when we dropped that breaker, he was left with the sound of our own breathing. He blinked once, slow, and looked at us without fear. Hey, I said softly, palms open. Hey, he repeated, in a voice with sleep in it. He took 2 steps, and Kincaid's medic steadied him by the elbow. We walked him to a quiet room and let him sit. It was like waking someone from a nap in the passenger seat. We tried it everywhere we could, gently, with patience, and the same pattern emerged. The entrained followed the hum down the ladder until they had no hums left, and then, if someone close and calm offered them a way to move, they would come. They looked pale and dried out. They remembered their names. They did not remember why they had been standing. They were not aggressive. They were not disoriented for long. They were, more than anything, thirsty. By dawn, we'd guided 23 people to the clinic. The physicians there, civilian and military, did what physicians do when they meet something they don't have a name for. They took labs. They listened to lungs. They asked careful questions and listened to all the answers. They wrote on whiteboards. They used the phrase, "no obvious trauma," until the phrase had its own gravity. I walked back outside into Utah's blunt gold morning and looked over the flat plain. A coyote trotted along the far fence, ignoring us like we were some human dream it could run out of. Dogs howled from English Village, low and slow and wrong, as if they'd been untrained overnight. Ops gave us the next part of the plan. We need to account for everyone. We also need to know if this is only on post. Morgan County and Tuel are asking questions. The state EOC is on our net now. We need to keep this calm. We absolutely need to avoid drawing a crowd to a sound source. Do not use sirens. Do not use public address unless you absolutely have to. Copy, Kincaid said. Recommend we prioritize power and water. If hum is the magnet, we control the magnets. Concur, Ops said. And Staff Sergeant Rios, I want an external link held steady. If we lose it, we go blind to the guard in Salt Lake. Understood, I said, and gave the tower on Granite Peak a grateful pat as if it could feel it. By mid-morning, our world had boundaries. It was not everywhere. It was Dugway and points west into the test ranges. The state troopers at Skull Valley saw nobody standing along their fence lines. The Toole Army Depot reported normal operations. Hill AFB up north kept launching and recovering like any Wednesday. This thing, whatever it was, lived inside our perimeter, and where it leaked out along a road, it seemed to thin. Whether that was physics or a luck of the wind, we could not say. At noon, the first helicopter from the Utah Army National Guard set down at Michael Army Airfield, UH-60, green and purposeful. The pilots came from the Army Aviation Support Facility at South Valley Regional, their radio check clean, their rotors lifting a halo of dust. We had asked them to land silent as they safely could. They smiled into their mics and did. We ferried a medical augmentation team from Salt Lake and a state emergency manager who carried a notebook like a compass. They moved like they knew everyone was watching. I briefed the state manager on the apron. Positions, numbers, what we tried. He listened and then looked out over the flats. You think it's the hum? I think, I said, that if you have 1,000 tuning forks across a desert and you strike one, the others that share its note are going to sing. That's not science. That's a metaphor, but it's the best I've got. He nodded. Metaphors help. Keep going. We built a map of sounds. It looked like a band rehearsal schedule. We listed transformers that buzzed, HVAC units that sang, fence lines that droned in crosswind, compressors with tired bearings. In English Village, we walked with residents and asked them to power down air purifiers and save their vacuuming for later. People cooperated. You could tell by their faces that some had slept standing a while in the night, leaning toward the bathroom fan, and had woken before dawn with a stiff neck and a story they needed to hand to someone else. In the afternoon, we found the first place the metaphor was not enough. The far test track sat in a shallow depression, ringed with a berm. It was built for unmanned runs of all sorts of vehicles, and its control shed was new and very proud of its climate control. When we approached, there were no figures lined along the fence. That relaxed us. We dismounted and walked the last 100 yards. The door to the control shed was jammed open with a boot that had no foot in it. Inside, the air thrummed. Every rack fan was on. An old metal clipboard lay under the intake vent, vibrating in place. And in the far corner, half hidden behind a console, a line of 6 people stood with their hands at their sides and their eyes on the floor, as if the concrete itself had found a voice. Power, Kincaid said. I went to the panel and looked. The breakers were labelled in proud label maker script. HVAC, lights, rack A, rack B, door. I cut HVAC first. The 6 swayed toward the racks. I cut rack A. They leaned toward rack B. I cut rack B. They leaned toward the door, motor housing, small and hot and loud. We cut that, and the room softened, and for a half second, there was a silence so clean and complete I could feel my skull become a resonator. The 6 turned their heads, first a millimeter, then, with some visible effort, a degree, then enough to count as a look. One of them swallowed. You're okay, Kincaid said, quiet and precise. We're right here. They came back in waves. We gave them water and took them into the shade and listened to them talk about the last thing they remembered. The sound of a motor in the wind like a huge tuning fork, a feeling of leaning, a nap they stayed inside too long. None of them remembered fear. None of them remembered choosing to stand. We were very careful on the radio to avoid words that would set anyone's hair on fire. We did not say outbreak, we said event, We did not say infection. We said condition. When someone asked if this was a chemical exposure, the clinic said they had found no evidence of that. When someone whispered the word zombie, nobody repeated it. Still, the word lived under everything. I'm not a scientist. I'm a person who makes radios work so other people can do their jobs. But patterns matter to me, and the pattern that kept landing was this. Sound called them. Silence gave them back. At dusk, after a day of careful power downs, we got our first transmission that made the hairs on my arm stand upright. It did not come over our internal net. It came over an old VHF marine band we kept in the rack for tests with remote units. An open channel like a rural road. The voice was thin and far and made of sand. Michael Field, this is coordination, mobile, please copy. I grabbed the mic and kept my voice steady. Coordination mobile, this is Michael, go ahead. Convoy returning, 3 vehicles. We hit this is West Chimney crew. We're at the basalt cut. We have some people with us who won't sit down. They're not. The voice paused. They're breathing. They're just standing in the beds. We're keeping it quiet. Understood, I said. Pull to the staging line west of the tower. We'll meet you. Keep engine RPMs low. Avoid horn. Copy. Copy. We can do slow. We can do careful. We met them in falling light. 3 dusty trucks crept into the staging area like they were escorting a sleeping animal. In the beds, 8 people stood with soft eyes and steady breaths, hands resting lightly on the side rails. The drivers moved like librarians. Kincaid's team and the medics guided them to the clinic one by one, with the easy patience of friends leading friends to a shade tree. The man on the VHF climbed out of the lead truck. He was sunburned and bone-tired and wore a grin that held too many emotions. I'm Ortiz, he said. West Chimney. We were out near the old tower. There's a thing there. What kind of thing? I asked. He squinted out toward the black thumb of the tower on the horizon, like a whistle the size of a bus. It's one of the old pressure sirens. It's been dead for years. Today it decided not to be. We were checking a relay and heard it. Sounded like a big animal thinking. You could feel it in your ribs. We shut it down. People who were standing near the old piers woke up. We did not cheer, but there was a feeling like good weather arriving. That night, we met in ops and adjusted the plan again. There was a source, maybe more than one. We had to find them. We built a hunt that looked like music. We sent quiet teams to known loud places. We built a map with pins and strings and circles of influence. We coordinated with the guard. We told the residents of English Village what we were doing in terms that wouldn't wake the wrong stories. And I went back to Granite Peak to baby my dish because communication had become the thread that held our world together. If the thread snapped, the fabric would fray. In the midnight hour, the wind changed. In desert places, wind isn't random. It has schedules and habits. Tonight, it came around from the west and slid through the basalt like a bow across a cello. The hum crawled back, different pitch now, and our phones on the table rattled just enough to notice. Some of the entrained we'd brought to the clinic stood up in their sleep and had to be coaxed back to their cots by a nurse with gentlest voice on the Great Basin. Rios, Ops said, we've got reports from the fuel farm. The storage tank ladder is singing. We'll take it, I said, and gathered a small team. The fuel farm is a neat grid of steel and discipline on the north side of the airfield. At night, it looks like civilization drew a rectangle on the desert and dared the desert to argue. The ladder on the big tank had a harmonic. It had found a voice. A mechanic stood under it, neck craned, a 1/4-inch housing vent rattling like a penny on a drum. We cut the pump, and the mechanic's eyes unglazed. He looked at us and said, very calmly, I dreamed I was listening to rain. We laughed because you laugh when the spell breaks, even if the magic that broke was a bad one. At 3 o'clock, English Village went dark for 60 seconds by plan. We'd warned everyone on paper and in person that we needed to know if a clean power down helped people sleep through the hum. When the lights went out, dogs stopped their slow, unhappy howling. When they came back, A baby cried and then fell asleep. I heard it over the radio because people leave mics open when they are tired. I thanked the parents later for their cooperation, and they joked that we were welcome to come over and do the 60-second trick at nap time on weekends. We did not make jokes in front of those who still stood. At dawn of day 2, the pattern changed again. That's what living things do. They change patterns when you think you've seen the edge of their shape. We found 3 entrained standing not by machines or fences or ducts, but along a shallow trench where a fibre line ran. The line should not carry sound, but it does carry power for its repeaters, and somewhere a worn transformer had given that power a note. When we opened the vault and cut a breaker, the 3 blinked and looked at us with a bewildered relief that made my throat tight. Those of us in masks learned the art of talking with only our eyes and hands. A palm up says wait, a palm down says calm. 2 fingers at your own chest says I'm here. We learned that the entrained would follow us like sleepwalkers if we walked with confidence and were the loudest thing nearby. In the soft way, not the hard way. We learned to love the sound of quiet boots on salt because it meant we were doing it right. We also learned where we were brittle. At Michael Army Airfield, there was one place we could not simply turn off and have done with it. The tower beacon. That light had obligations beyond us. So we wrapped it with caution tape, metaphorically, and posted a small team to shepherd anyone who drifted toward it. On the second evening, one entrained civilian approached the beacon housing with an intent, steady walk. We intercepted at a respectful distance and talked with him until his head turned toward us, then gently guided him back to the clinic. It was, for a moment, the most delicate thing I had ever done, more like leading a dance than enforcing a perimeter. So many parts of the day felt like that, a strange choreography composed of patience and signal. On day 3, we sent a joint team to the old siren near West Chimney, the one that had woken itself the night before. It was a relic, a steel mouth on a trailer, the sort of thing a museum might love if it could be lifted. A maintenance log in a cracked plastic sleeve said it had been powered last in 2005. Someone had penned a smiley face in blue ballpoint as a prayer. Somehow, Windle Ware, or a short, had closed a circuit in the distribution panel and made the motor sing by itself. The team pulled the feed, documented everything, and sent me a photo of the big metal bell sleeping under tarp. The caption read, "Shh." The clinic sent their first consolidated note to the state that afternoon. It said, among other precise lines, careful and responsible, that they could detect no evidence of chemical exposure, no shared pathogen consistent with conventional categories, no signs of neurological degradation on basic assessments. The electrolyte imbalances looked like dehydration. The exam notes read like poetry written by tired people trying to be exact. Patient responds to quiet voice and simple instruction. Effect even. Orientation returns within minutes. Requests water, remembers name, employer, spouse, does not recall period of standing, no signs of distress about memory gap beyond reasonable surprise. The state asked whether the event could spread. The clinic replied that if it did, they believed they could help people back with environment control and patient guidance. The words "no panic" appeared in the margin twice in different handwriting. On the evening of day 3, the first rumour got in that I could not shoot down. A social media post from a cousin of a contractor that used a different word from ours and said it 10 times in 50 words. That word was picked up by a hungry loop in the algorithms and flung across the state like chaff. Channel 8 asked for comment. The public affairs officer stepped up and said we had an event, that we were managing it, that affected persons were stable and improving, and that we were grateful for the patience of our families and partners. It was a good statement. It did not change what strangers were going to say online. It did, however, change how we held our shoulders. We were no longer only solving a problem. We were guarding a story. By then, I had slept 8 hours in 3 days around the edges of a folding chair. I had eaten crackers and apples, and every bite tasted like dust from a world I loved. I wanted to sit on the hood of a truck and watch the moon heal the desert back to indifference. Instead, I went to Granite Peak for the 6th time and adjusted a fraction of a degree to keep our external link strong because the wind wanted to see if I would give up. I would not. There are moments in a long event when the whole story narrows to a single decision that feels small and is not. Ours came on day 4 when a transformer near the main power substation began to sing so loudly that it pulled in a crowd like a magnet pulls filings. We had a ring of personnel at a safe distance, and beyond them, 40 entrained souls standing at patient attention within sight of a piece of equipment that would be dangerous even to a fully alert worker. We could not get close enough to pull its power without drawing the ring in with the hum. Every motor on the field leaned its voice toward the transformer's song. My radios activated and deactivated involuntarily as body mics picked up breaths and swallowed words. Ops asked for a plan. Kincaid, calm in his bones, said, "We need to reverse the gravity. We need a louder, kinder star." We built one. We rolled a sound trailer in, a big portable generator, not for power but for its engine, the quiet kind used for film sets. We placed it 300 feet away behind a berm and turned it on at the lowest responsible idle. We placed baffles to aim the sound. We used the structure of the field to bend tone. The ring leaned a little, like sunflowers to sun. We increased throttle by a breath. The ring leaned more. The transformer hummed in protest, and then, on a technician's count, we dropped its breaker. The field exhaled. The ring swayed, and one by one, and in pairs, people let us take their elbows and lead them away, like ushers at a quiet concert's end. We stepped aside once they were safe and let the generator idle in the warm dusk. "Thank you," I whispered to it. A soldier thanking a machine, which felt exactly correct. By day 5, we were counting recoveries, not mysteries. The numbers were not the whole truth. Numbers never are, but they sang of progress. When we made our end-of-day report to the state EOC, we could say that of those who had been entrained at one time or another, most were now sleeping in their own beds or hospital cots, eating normal food, talking with loved ones in normal sentences, asking when they could go back to work with an irritation that meant they were themselves. We had not lost anyone. The few who relapsed did so in predictable places, near fans that someone forgot, under awnings that hummed in new wind, beside machines that we were in the process of replacing. We adjusted, we learned. We taped off the mouth of the old siren like a fairy tale and wrote "Do not feed with wind" in the log because someone needed to smile. On day 6, the first out-of-state journalist got onto post by accident with a delivery truck and was gently escorted to the gate with a folder of our statements and a kind request to respect our people. He left with a story about how the army and a desert base handled a strange week with more patience than drama. He was disappointed that he had not found pictures to thrill his subscribers. He was relieved that he had not found tragedy. He wrote a headline that said nothing like what we had lived and yet did not hurt us. I did not read the comments. On day 7, I took my first real walk across the flats with no crisis on my radio. English Village's windows were open. A dad taught a kid to ride a bike with a hand on the seat and practice breaths. The clinic's whiteboard had more names in the home column than the here column. The dogs slept. The sky, which had been loud with rotor wash and worry, returned to a silence that was not absence, but a presence of peace. Far off, on the silhouette line, where the basalt rolls up into a low hill, a coyote stopped and looked back the way they do when they are curious but not invested. It wagged its tail once and trotted on. Ops closed the emergency status that afternoon. We kept our comms plan in place. We wrote down everything we'd learned in bullet points that turned into paragraphs that turned into an after-action review. We suggested a schedule of maintenance on anything that hummed. We asked for funds to replace transformers older than me. We recommended a new policy. At night, when the wind is right, some parts of the base should sleep with fewer machines on. The clinic wrote more careful words. Patients were stable. Follow up in a week. Note any sensitivity to sound. Drink water. Rest. They did not mention the word we had not used. They did not need to. Everyone had felt it, and everyone had chosen the sound they wanted more. The voices of their families in kitchens with quiet appliances. That night, I climbed Granite Peak one last time that week at sunset because it had become a ritual. The dish hummed, but in a way that spoke of purpose, not mischief. I laid a palm on its housing and thought about all the pieces that had held that week together. A JLTV idling like a patient horse. A generator that decided to be a star for an hour. A tower beacon that kept promises. A doctor's gentle voice. A security sergeant's calm in the ring. A state manager's notebook that didn't flinch from metaphors. A young tech named Ashley waking up in a corridor and saying, softly, "Water." I looked out from the platform. The desert is a wide, truthful face that never pretends it is anything but itself. If we were going to tell a story about what had happened, we owed it that same honesty. It had been odd and uncanny, and, in places, frightening in the way that being responsible for others can be. It had not been a movie. It had been a week of very human patience, active, applied, creative, as an entire small town in uniform and coveralls and pajamas decided to lead each other out of a song they hadn't chosen to hear. Back at the base of the tower, Kincaid waited with his arms crossed and his helmet off. He looked like the desert had baked him into something elemental and then let him cool into the shape of a man. "Quiet up there?" he asked. "Good quiet," I said. "Ops says the governor called," he said. "Wants to thank people for keeping heads cool. Wants to know what helped." "Tell him it was water," I said, smiling, "and turning things off one at a time, and not using sirens when we were scared." He nodded. "And radios, I agreed. I slept that night for 10 hours and dreamed of the first thing I learned about radios. That signal beats noise when you narrow the bandwidth and tune carefully. That clarity is a deliberate act. When I woke, the world was ordinary again in the way ordinary worlds are. Flawed, humming, loved, survivable. If a stranger asks me someday about the week the military base lost contact, I will not use the dramatic word they're hoping for. I will tell them what we felt. That a desert full of machines found a note together, and that it took a larger choir, the stubborn choir of patient people, to sing a steadier song. I will tell them about the hum in a fence, and the hush of a room when you switch off the last fluorescent and speak softly to a person who is returning. I will tell them that we learned the science we needed on the fly and built the rest out of respect. And if they press, if they ask if I was afraid, I will say this: fear wasn't the loudest thing. Duty was. Kindness was. The note we chose to follow was each other's voices, low and clear, saying, "I'm here, take my hand, let's go home." Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.